Did you find out where he went? Wang Chong asked Ma Yinlong as he lifted his gaze. I didn't follow him. Due to the lush flora and fauna in the mountain forest, there's a good chance that I might be noticed by him. Thus, I backed off at this point. However, there is no doubt that the gathering point of the Gogrian elite warriors is outside the city, Ma Yinlong replied, knowing that Wang Chong was referring to the assassin. Outside the city. Wang Chong's eyebrows twitched. He turned to look at the slightly protruding tip of the mountain above the city wall as he fell into deep contemplation. After combing through the capital time and time again, the largest gathering point of the Gogurians turned out to be outside the city. Even though it felt weird, it was understandable. First, they had the secret tunnel, so it wasn't too difficult for them to enter the city in large groups. Second, it was also much more convenient for them to escape should their trail be uncovered. What do you intend to do next? Wang Chong glanced at Ma Yinlong. The current Ma Yinlong carried a spirited disposition far different from the abject middle-aged man who was beaten up outside the Royal Jade Pavilion. His eyes seemed to be burning with intense fighting spirit. Given Ma Yinlong's capabilities, he could have easily captured the assassin and interrogated him for the location of their base. However, he didn't do so. Instead, he let the assassin go. Wang Chong believed that the other man must have his reasons for doing so. As the person who boasted the most thorough understanding of King Sojurim, Wang Chong felt that Ma Yinlong deserved to be trusted. The Gogrian warriors are all death troops. It is impossible to obtain any useful information out of them. Capturing them abruptly would only alarm them instead. Knowing what Wang Chong was thinking, Ma Yinlong explained his actions. After so many years, they finally appear once more. It's about time to settle it once and for all. Ma Yinlong sighed deeply as complicated emotions surfaced in his eyes. Ma Yinlong had asked for a 3-day break. He didn't mention where he was heading to, and Wang Chong didn't ask either. Everyone had a story behind them, and Ma Yinlong was no exception either. There was no need to dig up the details. But 3 days later, Wang Chong saw the results of Ma Yinlong's efforts in the Royal Jade Pavilion. Standing before Wang Chong were 3 disheveled middle-aged men. The first man was a bird merchant, and an exceptionally large eagle was perched on his shoulder. The second man was a single-armed drunkard. His left sleeve drifted along with the wind, and even from afar, Wang Chong could smell the scent of alcohol from him. As for the last man, he looked like a mercenary who would do anything for money. The trio looked a little extraordinary for those in their trade, as though there was something deeper to them. However, that was all there was to it. There were plenty of people like them in the capital. Usually, Wang Chong wouldn't have spared this trio an additional glance on the streets. However, Ma Yinlong spent 3 whole days gathering these 3 people in order to introduce them to Wang Chong. Given that effort, he really had to examine them seriously. These people, they were officials from the Bureau of Punishments back then. Wang Chong asked as he assessed the trio before him. He could sense the same emotions from them as the one he sensed from Ma Yinlong back then. If his deductions weren't off, they should be those who were also affected by the case back then. But just these 2. Solitary Wolf was from the Bureau of Military Personnel. Ma Yinlong said heavily as he pointed to the ferocious-looking mercenary. Back then, there were many important and minor officials across the 6 bureaus who were assassinated, causing a huge uproar. We were the officials in charge of the case back then, and failing to solve the case, we were all punished. I was demoted to become a copyist in the Bureau of Punishments. Old Eagle was stripped of his position and investigated. He ended up spending several years in jail, and after he was out, he had no choice but to retire as a bird merchant. Even though Steel Arms wasn't jailed, he lost an arm while facing the Gogurians while investigating the case. After the incident, he spent his days in taverns in hopes of keeping his sobriety at bay. On the other hand, Solitary Wolf concealed his identity and became a mercenary instead, working for anyone who could offer him money. Throughout these years, many of our brothers have died or were crippled. We are probably the only ones who survived the Gogurians' assassinations. A tinge of sorrow permeated Ma Yinlong's voice as he recounted the affairs back then. The eyes of Old Eagle, Steel Arms, and Solitary Wolf behind him also reddened. Even though Wang Chong had never gone through the incident back then, and he knew not of the experiences of these men, he could roughly imagine what they had felt throughout these years from Ma Yinlong's voice. A decade ago, before King Sojurim assassinated the influential officials of the royal court, they were still ambitious young men of the Bureau of Military Personnel and Bureau of Punishments. They had a bright future laid out before them. Yet, due to that incident, the brothers who investigated the case together with them ended up either dead or crippled. The haughty, talented young men back then had fallen down to earth, reduced to such an unseemly plight. And it was on their sorrows that the name of King Sojurim bloomed to become a legend. The others also felt the same as well, and in an instant the atmosphere in the room grew heavy. We shouldn't talk about these depressing matters anymore. Perhaps this is our life. 15 years have passed, and we still can't escape our destiny. Since the matter started with us, let it end with us as well. Old Eagle, Steel Arms, and Solitary Wolf, this is Wang Gongzi. His grandfather is Duke Zhou of Great Tang. Initially, the trio only came here due to Ma Yinlong's plea. However, after hearing that Wang Chong's grandfather was Duke Zhou, their eyes were immediately filled with respect. Wang Gongzi. The three proud men immediately lowered their heads before Wang Chong and bowed deeply. Wang Gongzi, since you're the grandson of Duke Zhou, you can't be considered as an outsider. Back then, when we failed to solve the assassination case, we should have been executed under the laws of Great Tang. It's your grandfather and his group of officials that convinced His Majesty to spare us. Thus, Gongzi, feel free to command us as you please. Steel Arms stepped forward and said, and the other two nodded in agreement. Wang Chong's eyebrows shot up in astonishment. This was his first time hearing of this matter. If not for the trio speaking of it, he would probably never have learned of it either. But considering how large the case was back then, many eyes were probably on it. Given his grandfather's standing back then, it was natural that he would get involved as well. His grandfather would never stand idle and watch as Ma Yinlong and the others were executed by the royal court, given his temper. Wang Gongzi, don't judge them based on their appearance. Despite having a missing hand, being a drunkard, and a person who puts his life in for money, they are all top-notch experts. Furthermore, there are probably no other experts in the capital who knew the Gogurians better than they do. Ma Yinlong said, Steel Arms may only have a single arm, but his remaining right arm is extraordinarily powerful. His right arm swordsmanship is forceful and deadly. Even I don't have the confidence to stand up against him. Solitary Wolf often gambles with his life, fighting large groups of enemies at once. As such, his attacks wield fearsome might that even Gogrian assassins would have to back down before. Even back then, he was an expert in the Bureau of Military Personnel, and he was currently more formidable than he was then. Even the guards of the king residences wouldn't be able to match up to him now. He would serve as the greatest shield for Gongzi. Even if Gongzi were to meet with the assassination attempts of the Gogurians, as long as there is a breath remaining in Solitary Wolf, he won't allow anyone to get close to Gongzi. Wang Chong could tell that Ma Yinlong was worried that he would underestimate the men he brought, thinking that they were incapable of protecting him. But there was indeed nothing Wang Chong could refute in Ma Yinlong's words. Be it Mayasame Ayaka or the experts from the Zhuang clan and Qi clan, they were no match for Ma Yinlong and his group at all. After all, they were much older and had cultivated far longer than Mayasame Ayaka and the others. The gap in their experience was simply too huge. However, I really couldn't tell that beneath the strong alcohol smell of Steel Arms is a formidable expert, Wang Chong thought. He had experienced Ma Yinlong's might personally, and given that the latter was full of praise for Steel Arms's right arm swordsmanship, he must be truly powerful. Ma Yinlong had already introduced two of the trio, and only the last one was left. Wang Chong turned his gaze to the last man, Old Eagle. As for Old Eagle, his martial arts are only average. But he possesses a talent that we are in dire need of. That's the reason why I brought him here. Instead of beating around the bush, Ma Yinlong immediately dove into explaining Old Eagle's capabilities. Old Eagle is a formidable eagle tamer, and back in those years, he was publicly renowned to be the best in the capital. This is precisely the reason why he was sent to work together with us to investigate the Gogurians. The eagles he tamed are extremely intelligent, and they are capable of tracking, scouting, and hunting. In truth, the person whom the Gogurians wanted to eradicate the most back then wasn't me, Solitary Wolf, and the others, but Old Eagle. Even now, the Gogurians are still trying to track him down. Fortunately, other than the few of us, no one has ever met him. I believe Gongzi knows that the Gogurians like to use ravens as a source of communications. The ravens they use are exceptionally swift, such that even gerfalcons aren't able to keep up with them. However, the eagles that Old Eagle trained have successfully captured and followed them without being noticed. If we want to find the Gogurians' gathering point outside the city, we will require Old Eagle's ability. Ah! At this moment, Wang Chong finally widened his eyes in shock as he assessed the bird merchant, a tired old eagle before him. At this moment, he finally understood why Ma Yinlong went through so much trouble to bring him here. With Old Eagle's help, the Gogurians would be unable to conceal their tracks anymore. Furthermore, regardless of the messages they sent, Old Eagle would be able to intercept them beforehand. To deal with the Gogurians, Old Eagle's ability was indeed of vital importance. Ha ha ha! Wonderful! With all of you elders here, we won't have to worry about being unable to subdue the Gogurians. Wang Chong burst into laughter. At this moment, he couldn't feel any happier about his previous decision. Only with Ma Yinlong and his group could his plan be truly perfected. These people had fought with the Gogurians for more than a decade now, and this had given them a deep insight into how they operated and their habits. With them on the team, the probability of success in the operation against the Gogurians had increased immensely. With Old Eagle here, it won't be a problem uncovering the base of the Gogurians. However, this is still insufficient. Ma Yinlong wasn't as optimistic was Wang Chong. It doesn't matter how many Gogurian warrior or assassins die. The Gogurian Empire has more than enough troops to send over. This damage is truly insignificant to them. The main problem we have to deal with is King Sojurim. A frown etched itself deeply into Ma Yinlong's forehead. Just as the saying goes, shoot the horse before the rider, capture the chief before the bandits. Even if we were to ruin this operation of theirs, I don't have the absolute confidence that we will be able to capture King Sojurim. As long as he remains, the Gogurians will be able to make a comeback time and time again, or perhaps they might even go on a rampage to exact vengeance. We cannot bear this kind of damage, Ma Yinlong said. In an instant, the atmosphere in the room grew tense. Even the less intelligent guards from the Zhuang clan and Qi clan could understand the meaning behind Ma Yinlong's words. King Sojurim was the brain of the Gogurians in Great Tang. If he wasn't captured, this operation couldn't be considered as a success. These kinds of assassinations would only be carried out again and again in the future. Brother Ma is right. Gongzi, you have never fought against King Sojurim before, so you don't know him well. He might seem like a careful person usually, but there's an extremely demented side to him as well. He's definitely capable of doing such stuff. Steel Arms stepped forward and spoke with a grim expression at that moment. Back then, we actually managed to achieve significant success in our operations. We managed to kill a huge portion of the core team of the Gogurians in the capital. However, after the incident, King Sojurim began to exact his vengeance. Most of the brothers who fought alongside us back then were killed or crippled by relentless and frenzied assassinations from the Gogurians, leaving behind only the few of us. My left arm was also taken away by them then. The other two didn't say a word, but their faces indicated their agreement to Steel Arm's words. Wang Chong frowned as he recalled the assault on Kunwu training camp that night. The Gogurians there were vicious, and they were willing to die just to kill an additional enemy. Given that tenacity of theirs, they were definitely more than capable of doing such stuff. Only then did Wang Chong realize that he had placed his priorities wrongly. In truth, the very criterion for success in their operation would be whether they could capture King Sojurim or not. As long as the brain remained, the Gogurians would remain as a thorn stuck in the flesh of Great Tang. Even if this assassination attempt was foiled, they could always conduct another one. Furthermore, what was truly scary was that there was no saying when the Gogurians would strike. Great Tang might be able to keep its guard up for a month or two, but what if they were to exact vengeance a year or two later? At this point, destroying the bases of the Gogurians and killing their men was already a secondary concern. The main issue was whether they would be able to capture the chief spy King Sojurim or not. Elders, what are your thoughts on this matter? Wang Chong raised his head to look at them. Simple. The reason why Gongzi is reluctant to attack the Gogurian bases is to avoid alarming them, right? However, the current situation is different. What we will do is to alarm them. A cold glint gleamed in Ma Yinlong's narrowed eyes. It's about time to cause some chaos in the bases of those Gogurians in the capital. In this operation, Gongzi need not hold back. Only after destroying all of the Gogurian bases in the capital will we be able to mess up King Sojurim's plan, and he will be forced to appear. I know him. As the chief spy of Goguryeo, he is an extremely arrogant person. He wouldn't terminate a plan just because something goes awry. Instead, he would bring it forward. As long as his plan could succeed, he has no qualms sacrificing any number of his men. At the very end of his sentence, Ma Yinlong struck the table forcefully, and his face was so livid that even Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. His will to slaughter King Sojurim was stronger than anyone else's. Don't worry, leave this matter to me. After a short moment of silence, Wang Chong nodded. After leaving the Royal Jade Pavilion, Wang Chong headed straight for King Song's residence, and from there, he obtained several tokens that granted him the rights to mobilize various battalions of the Imperial Army. Only a Qinhuang like King Song would have the right to do such a thing. After that, Wang Chong went to find Uncle Li Lin. Dealing with the Gogurians was an important affair. If they were to do well, it would be a huge merit on their part. Rich meat goes not to outsiders. There was very little benefit that Wang Chong could obtain from this matter, so he would rather pass on the chance to his family member. Uncle Li Lin was also very decisive about it. After hearing Wang Chong's words, he immediately went on to discuss the matter with Imperial Army Marshal Zhao Fengqin, and eventually, a huge number of Imperial Army soldiers were placed under Li Lin's command. With these, there were around 4,000 experts under Wang Chong's grasp. At his request, there were also quite a number of master archers within the group. Needless to say, when clearing out the bases of the Gogurians with these troops, they could even fight a small-scale battle. The capital stood beneath the sun of heaven's feet. In order to prevent fear and panic amongst the populace, as well as to prevent the Gogurians from noticing anything beforehand, they gave up moving in the day, the time which it would be the most suited for them to move, and decided to operate deep in the night instead. Are you all ready? Late at night, Wang Chong stood beneath a tree, gazing at a residence far away. The rooms of the residence was brightly lit, like a lighthouse guiding everyone's way. Gongzi, we're ready. Master archers are planted at every single crucial escape route, and the only fate that awaits any who dares to leave the residence is death. A messenger Imperial soldier reported quietly from where he knelt behind Wang Chong. From his angle, fully armored Imperial soldiers stretched all the way to the horizon, encircling the residence tightly. These troops were all elites, and at Wang Chong's request, the front row was equipped with thick armor and a shield. The encirclement slowly narrowed, but without Wang Chong's orders, no one dared to make a move easily. Ready. Release the signal. Gazing coldly into the distance, Wang Chong abruptly chopped down with his hand. Boom! Responding to Wang Chong's gesture, a brilliant firework shot into the sky, leaving behind a long trail of smoke. It looked exceptionally conspicuous in the middle of the night. This was the signal to attack. Charge! The next instant, war cries shook the air. Above the land, many halos of thorns bloomed magnificently like beautiful flowers beneath the dark sky. Throughout the great Tang capital, from the first base that Wang Chong was in, the second base, the third base, all the way to the 14th base, every single base that the Gogurians had established in capital, with the exception of the gathering point beyond the walls, had all come under attack. 4,000 Imperial Army guards of the royal court and the wall patrol charged forward as ferociously as ravenous tigers, leaping over the residence walls and into its courtyard. Shield-wielding troops, master archers, cavalry, all of the various troops cooperated with one another, covering all aspects of battle, be it defense or offense. In an instant, All of the Gogrian bases were tightly surrounded. Enemy attack! From afar, these words, spouted in Kogurion, rang loudly in the air. The Gogrian sentries had finally noticed the advancing Imperial Army guards. Congratulations to user for killing 21 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded by Wang Chong's ears. Boom! Frenzied winds blew in accompaniment to the voice, and a surge of energy gushed into his body from his surroundings. What's going on? Sensing the changes in his body, Wang Chong was stunned. The operation had just barely begun, and he hadn't killed a single Gogrian. How could he receive such a notice? However, before Wang Chong's doubts could be resolved, an even more shocking scene occurred. Congratulations to user for killing 22 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 23 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 24 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 25 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? A series of familiar, cold voices echoed in his head, leaving Wang Chong dumbfounded. Dense origin energy gathered from all around and turned into Wang Chong's strength. Within a short moment, Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield grew by an amount far greater than it had in the past few months. However, what was even more baffling was that it was still growing at an insane pace. Shocked, perplexed, everything that was happening before Wang Chong had exceeded his understanding. But the growing bane of the battlefield aura clearly reassured Wang Chong that everything was real. Congratulations to user for killing 35 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 36 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 37 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 49 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 50 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 51 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Under this series of notices, Wang Chong was delighted. He subconsciously released the bane of the battlefield aura within him. Wang! In the dark night, a massive ripple that was privy only to Wang Chong's eyes spread into the distance. This time, at a distance of more than 1,200 meters away, Wang Chong could see a white ripple abruptly appearing beneath the feet of the Gogrian troops. Different from the very first time the halo appeared, the Gogrian troops inflicted with the white halo found their strength declining sharply. Fear slowly spread across the Gogurians as they sensed the abnormalities happening within them. In an instant, the pace at which the Gogurians died increased. Congratulations to user for killing 81 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 82 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 83 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 101 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 102 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Congratulations to user for killing 103 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire? Countless notices bombarded Wang Chong, and the vortex that had gathered around him grew even larger and more intense. In every moment of this battle, Wang Chong was growing at a pace which he dared not imagine in the past. Given that the battle had just begun, it was impossible that 100 men had died within the first base. Without a doubt, the notices the Destiny Stone sent involved the Gogrian soldiers from the other bases as well. Could this be the reason why? In the blink of an eye, a thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. He took a resplendent golden token out from his embrace. This was the token that King Song gave him, and it also represented the complete authority that he wielded over this operation. After much contemplation, the only reason why the dead Gogurians in the other bases could be attributed to him had to be due to this token of unparalleled authority. Does this mean that such a token, or perhaps the authority of an official, would allow the kills to be attributed to me in such an operation, and I need not slay the men personally? Wang Chong thought. Having come to this realization, Wang Chong was delighted. He had found a way to make his bane of the battlefield grow swiftly. Hong Long. At this moment, Wang Chong had finished the final step to his metamorphosis. Hong Long Long, furious winds raged, and thunder rumbled within his head. Along with this rumbling, a massive, formless ripple was suddenly pulled inward, dragging a huge surge of energy back to him. Congratulations to user for killing more than 100 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. The Bane of the Battlefield aura is upgraded from level 0 to level 1. The distinctive cold voice of the Destiny Stone echoed in Wang Chong's head. At the same moment, the area of Wang Chong's Bane of the Battlefield aura expanded greatly. In an instant, all of the Goguryeo troops in the first base were covered in the area of effect of the halo. A white ripple abruptly appeared around them, scaring the Imperial Army guards fighting with them. Thinking that it might be a hidden means of their enemies, they immediately fought even more furiously. However, the Goguryeo troops they were facing were even more shocked than them. They were already in a disadvantageous position, and this aura only made it worse for them. Some of the true martial realm One-Dan single halo experts even found their thorn halos flickering weakly, like candles before a strong gale. However, the ones who were hit the worst were the Origin Energy Tier 9 Goguryeo soldiers. Putting aside how their cultivation fell to Origin Energy Tier 8, there were signs that it was going to fall even further. What's going on? The unkempt Li Jihuan was astonished and angered. As the head of the base, he wasn't affected by the bane of the battlefield. As such, he couldn't understand what the others were experiencing. However, it was clear to him that none of his men were in their best states. Retreat! Retreat! Li Jihuan bellowed loudly. The Great Tang Imperial Army had clearly come well prepared. Not only were their formations organized, they also had plenty of experts with them. Li Jihuan knew that now that they were exposed, the base was a goner. The only hope he had now was that the only place exposed was theirs. Xiu xiu xiu. Steel arrows suddenly whizzed out from the depths of the residence like venomous vipers. At this crucial moment, the Condor snipers in the first base had made their moves. Even though there were only 2 of them, they clearly displayed the incredible might that Condor snipers wielded. In just a moment, 5 deadly arrows had struck the Imperial soldiers in the courtyard. Boom! But not long after they made their move, a sound reminiscent of the heavens being torn down sounded from afar. Before Li Jihuan could even react, Hong Hong. The 2 Condor snipers were impaled in their chests by 2 thick and sharp arrows, their bodies nailed firmly to the floor. Too fast. They had no time to react at all. In just an instant, the 2 Condor snipers that they had spent great effort to groom breathed their last. Li Jihuan's face immediately turned as pale as a sheet of paper as he gazed into the distance. So, without any hesitation, Li Jihuan immediately leaped onto the roof and escaped eastwards. This base was doomed. It was impossible to salvage the situation anymore. Li Jihuan knew that the best he could do was to preserve his own life. Where do you think you are escaping to? A furious bellow echoed through the air. Just as Li Jihuan was jumping across the walls of the residence, an Imperial Army commander suddenly appeared before him. With rumbling stellar energy, his saber cut down to intercept Li Jihuan. At the same moment, in the distance, the 2-meter-tall master archer that King Song sent to Wang Chong also lowered the humongous bow in his hands. There wasn't the slightest emotion on his face, as though he had only accomplished something unimportant. Good job! Beneath the shadow of the tree, Wang Chong immediately uttered a compliment generously upon seeing this feat. This fellow was simply too powerful. He was at an entirely different level from the others. If he had been there on Kunwu on the night of the assault, he would have been able to destroy all of the Goguryeo and Turk master archers single-handedly. That was how formidable this expert King Song assigned to him was. Clang! Without any hesitation, Wang Chong drew his sword and charged forward with a roar. Gongzi! Be careful! Seeing Wang Chong charging forward, Mayasame Ayaka was alarmed. She immediately leaped out from the nearby bushes and followed behind him. Haha! Don't worry. Given the huge army we have here, what kind of danger could there be? Wang Chong chuckled as he drove his phantom steps to its limits, flitting into the distance. Congratulations to user for killing 140 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 141 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 142 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 175 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 176 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 177 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. As the emotionless voice continued calling out in his head, an immense amount of energy seemed to seep continuously into Wang Chong's body, strengthening him. The bane of the battlefield halo grew rapidly. The formless ripple around Wang Chong was expanding at a rapid pace. Putting aside how it had covered the entire first base, it was even swiftly creeping toward the location of the second base. Furthermore, the effects it had on true martial realm experts was growing stronger by the moment. Some of the true martial realm Wundan single halo cultivators found their halos of thorns being extinguished altogether as Wang Chong's halo grew stronger. Robbed of their martial halos, their strength immediately declined sharply once more. On the other hand, the Origin Energy Realm Goguryeo troops found the effects of the halo capping after their cultivation fell to Origin Energy Tier 7. Wang Chong was still perplexed initially, but he soon understood the logic behind it. The ability of his halo affected only the origin energy within cultivators, and not their physical prowess. As such, the cultivation of Origin Energy Realm Goguryeo troops didn't fall any further than Origin Energy Tier 7. But even so, the bane of the battlefield halo was sufficiently fearsome with just this. After all, almost everyone in the first base found their cultivation plummeting by one entire tier. In a battle, it could easily spell the difference between victory and defeat. This was the might of a war-type halo. By this time, the battle in the first base was nearly settled. Wang Chong only managed to engage a couple of opponents before the battle concluded entirely. Goguryeo corpses filled the entire courtyard, and blades and steel arrows were scattered all over the ground. Reporting to Gongzi, we found a few steel chests in the depths of the Goguryeo base. After the battle concluded, an imperial soldier walked up to Wang Chong and reported the presence of a few chests in a secret underground chamber in the first base. Wang Chong followed the Imperial Army soldier to the secret underground chamber, and indeed, a row of locked chests was by the wall. What is inside? Weapons? Wang Chong thought. Given that the Goguryans were prepared to go on a slaughter in the capital, they had to be in possession of a huge amount of weapons. Thinking so, Wang Chong drew his wood steel sword and clang. The lock was split apart. Then, with a creaking sound, the lid was opened. However, an unexpected sight appeared before the group. The moment they opened the chest, a brilliant golden gleam mixed with a strong medicinal aura surfaced before them. Contained in the chest were not weapons, but highly matured Goguryeo ginsengs. SSSS. Upon seeing the entire chest of Goguryeo ginsengs, even the imperial soldier gasped in shock. They might not know much about the Goguryeo Empire, but they did know the value of the ginseng produced there. It was one of the most precious treasures that a martial artist could obtain. Yet, there was an entire chest of it before them at this very instant. Making a rough estimation, there were at least 600 of them here. This was a humongous wealth. I've really struck it rich this time. Seeing the brilliant Goguryeo ginsengs before him, Wang Chong was dumbstruck for an instant. His harvest for this operation was far greater than he had expected, such that he fell into a momentary daze. If contained within this chest isn't weapons but ginsengs, is it possible for the other chests to be? Suddenly, a thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind as his gaze fell on the other chest. Agitation and excitement immediately struck him. Clang, clang, clang. With this thought in mind, Wang Chong swiftly broke all of the locks with his wood steel sword. Prying open the remaining 11 chests, the same resplendent golden glow flashed before him once more. There were 12 chests of Goguryeo ginsengs here. He had really struck it rich this time. In that instant, Wang Chong couldn't help but burst out laughing from sheer delight. Gongzi, how do we deal with these Goguryeo ginsengs? Bowing slightly, the Imperial Army soldier sought for instructions. His attitude was humble and had no intentions of laying his hands on this huge wealth here. Wang Chong was the highest commander for this operation. Not to mention, with King Song's token on him, he represented King Song himself. Even if it was a mountain of gold or chest of divine pills, no one would possibly dare to vie with King Song for it. At the very least, the Imperial Army was sufficiently disciplined to know better than to do so. Leave behind one chest to share it with the brothers. As for the rest, carry them to my residence. Wang Chong contemplated for a moment before waving his hands majestically. As the head of this operation, he did have the right to determine the allocation of the loot. King Song would have no qualms about it even if he were to learn of the matter. Striking down the Gogrian base and diminishing their influence in the capital was a huge merit in itself. While Wang Chong wouldn't be officially recognized for his efforts, and promotion and the like didn't apply to him, he was at least entitled to such benefits. Thank you, Gongzi. Hearing that Wang Chong had left a chest for them, the Imperial Army member was delighted. One must know that going by the rules, Wang Chong had the rights to claim it all for himself. Yet he chose to leave a chest for them. Considering the number of ginsengs in each chest, that was a massive sum of money. Also, their contribution in this matter would also be recorded down as their merits, so they would benefit greatly from this operation as well. Soon, the allocation of all of the loot was decided, and the corpses of the Gogurians were emptied as well. Wang Chong didn't forget that each of them held a ginseng in their possession. While the battle in the first base had concluded, the fight was still ongoing in other locations. Congratulations to user for killing 301 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 302 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 303 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. As that emotionless voice continued ringing in Wang Chong's head, the number of kills soon exceeded the 300 mark, and it was still rising at an incredible pace. The pleasure from seeing one's strength rising swiftly was indescribable. To think that King Song's token would have so many benefits to it. It's a pity that this is a one-of-a-kind event. I will have to return it back to him after the operation. Wang Chong sighed in self-pity. The core members of the royal court had their own tokens, be it the Qinhuang or the influential officials. These were issued to them by the royal court, and they had to take good care of them personally. While it was possible to loan a token out from time to time, they couldn't let them out of their hands for an extended period of time. Thus, it would probably be a long time before he could experience such swift growth once more. Leaving the first base, Wang Chong, along with Mayase Mayaka and the guards from the Zhuang clan and Qi clan, headed swiftly for the other bases. Wang Chong's intention was simple. The only reason why the first base could be destroyed so swiftly was due to the support from his bane of the battlefield. However, the same couldn't be said about the other bases. Thus, by heading to the other bases, his halo could help end the battle faster, thus reducing the death toll on their side. Congratulations to user for killing 485 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 486 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 487 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. By this moment, the range of Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo had already expanded to a radius of more than 8 kilometers, or a diameter of 16 kilometers. An hour later, all of the battles had come to an end. The number of Gogrian soldier kills ended up at 623. Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo had also reached a radius of around 11 kilometers. At the same time, he also obtained a few more dozen chests filled with Gogrian ginseng. What's more, most of them were golden in color. Only very rarely would he see ordinary white ginseng of maturity below 100 years. Most of these chests were sent to Wang Chong's residence as the reward for the chief of the operation. Ha ha ha, Chonger! We've really achieved a huge merit this time round. By the wall of the 8th Gogurian base stood a verdant tree that seemed to reach up to the sky. Beneath its lush crown, Uncle Li Lin's face reddened in excitement as he stared at the huge flame burning down the courtyard. This kind of contribution was exactly what he was in dire need of. After all, he couldn't possibly climb up the ranks of the Imperial Army just by depending on Zhao Fengchen. He wouldn't win the respect of anyone that way. However, with such a credit to his name, even without Zhao Fengchen's recommendation, he would still be able to rise up. He was getting more and more fond of this nephew of his. The more he looked at the boy, the prouder he felt. Other people depended on fawning on the wealthy and the noble to climb through the ranks, but his greatest support was his nephew pushing him instead. Even though he was reliant on his nephew, Li Lin didn't think there was anything shameful about it. Rather, it was an honor that such a talented youth had emerged from their clan. After living in humility for the past few decades, his time had finally come. "Uncle, you need not worry. This is just the start. Wait until we capture King Sojurim. That will then be a truly great merit. With that, you won't have to worry about a lack of promotion anymore." Wang Chong chuckled as he stood alongside his uncle. In the period of time they hadn't met, he realized that his uncle had changed once again. His stature had grown more upright, and he looked like a spear erected on the spot. He was also filled with drive and spirit, and it seemed like nothing was impossible for him. Without a doubt, Uncle's cultivation had improved greatly during this period of time. It was good that the cultivation technique Wang Chong gave him had worked its wonders, and he hadn't wasted his effort. Wang Chong felt comforted inside. He hadn't introduced Zhao Fengchen to Uncle Li Lin just for his uncle to remain under Zhao Fengchen's shadow for his entire life. Rather, Zhao Fengchen should be a means to his uncle's ends. His greatest goal was for Uncle Li Lin to become an independent and powerful force in the Imperial Army, not a follower of anyone else. "Uncle, you should take these 5 chests of Gogrian ginseng with you. Also, I'll send some pills to you soon." Wang Chong spoke up suddenly as a thought occurred to him. "Haha! Are you afraid that my cultivation is lacking?" Li Lin turned around and chuckled. "Hehe. Uncle, are you afraid of gaining too much influence? If I recall correctly, the Imperial Army is split into several factions. In such an environment, it would be beneficial to be stronger than the others. Besides, the ranks in the Imperial Army are tied to one's cultivation, right? In any case, there's surely no mistake in raising your cultivation," Wang Chong replied. 5 chests should contain more than 3,000 Gogrian ginseng. It was more than sufficient for Uncle Li Lin's cultivation. On the other hand, Uncle Li Lin fell into deep contemplation. Honestly, his initial thoughts were to reject Wang Chong's offer. He was already content with the merits he had earned from this operation, and since the ginseng was going to their clan anyway, there was no need for him to fight over it. However, after hearing Wang Chong's words, he couldn't help but rethink his perspective. His nephew's words were spot on. The factional rivalry in the Imperial Army was much more intense than outsiders could ever imagine. Just by following behind Zhao Fengchen for a short period of time, he could already feel that he was being rejected by the other factions. In the Imperial Army, everything was dictated by strength. The strongest fist would gain the greatest respect and loudest voice. "All right then," Uncle Li Lin eventually nodded. Wang Chong chuckled in response. "Report. Lords, we've finished sweeping through the battlefields." An Imperial Army guard rushed over and bowed respectfully before the duo at that moment. "Good. You can leave now." Uncle Li Lin waved his hands, gesturing for the Imperial soldier to back down. After which, he turned to Wang Chong with a sharp glint in his eyes. "Chong-er, now that the battle is over, what is your next course of action?" "Hee. You didn't alarm the final base, did you?" Wang Chong asked. "Of course not." Li Lin smiled in response. "Good. Let's withdraw our forces then." After sending Uncle Li Lin off with his gaze, Wang Chong turned around and returned to the Royal Jade Pavilion. At such a moment, the advantages of possessing a place of his own were shining through. The other shops of the capital didn't open at night, and the Wang clan was too conspicuous. By taking the Royal Jade Pavilion as his base of operations, it was more convenient, and he could avoid unwanted attention as well. Even if others were to see him visiting the pavilion often, they would only think that he relished the dishes here. It was hard to imagine that he would buy down the whole place. What was even harder to imagine was that he would actually arrange for Ma Yinlong, Old Eagle, Steel Arms, and Solitary Wolf to be stationed here. How is it? As soon as Wang Chong stepped to the second floor of the pavilion, the group of four immediately turned their gazes to him and asked him hurriedly. Wang Chong made an okay sign, only to meet with the doubtful gazes of the four. Only after a moment of confusion did he realize that the four didn't understand his gesture. It's done. Wang Chong smiled. It would take a miracle for them to fail after mobilizing so many elites and experts of the Imperial Army, as well as the authority of King Song. Who? After hearing Wang Chong's words, the four of them heaved a collective sigh of relief. Their hearts finally fell back into their chests. Wang Gongzi, please pardon us for not participating in the operation tonight. We are familiar faces to King Sojurim, so we might alert him were we to appear on any of the battlefields. The same goes for Old Eagle's eagles as well. It wouldn't be good if our existences were to be revealed to him too early on. If King Sojurim were to notice our involvement in the operation tonight, the nature of the event would change. Perhaps, he might even cancel the whole operation. Ma Yinlong quickly explained, suddenly realizing something. Don't worry, I understand. Wang Chong chuckled casually as he waved his hands to show that he thought nothing of it. As the saying went, doubt not the man you use not the man you doubt. Since Wang Chong decided to put his trust into Ma Yinlong and the others, how could he doubt their intentions? Seeing Wang Chong's magnanimous gestures, the group of four were a little impressed. This Gongzi might be young, but he possessed maturity far beyond his age. A scion he might be, but he didn't possess the aura of decadence that usually came with one. 15 years had passed, but they might really be able to capture King Sojurim this time. Elders, what do you think we should do next? Seated cross-legged opposite to the group, Wang Chong humbly asked for their guidance. Gongzi, your men didn't touch the last base, right? They didn't. Good. The main goal of our operation is that base. If we were to overthrow all of their bases at once, the Gogurians would surely suspect that we knew of all of their movements. On the other hand, if we were only to attack some of them, they might still bank their hopes on luck. In fact, the more bases we destroy, the stronger this thought becomes. We understand King Sojurim's mentality. He's an incredibly arrogant person, so arrogant that he wouldn't change a plan that he has decided upon easily. No matter how huge the sacrifice may be, he would go along with it as long as he can see success at the end of the route. The greatest advantage we have at hand is that he's in the open, while we are in the dark. You are a new player in this game, so no matter how many men you have killed and how many Gogurian bases you have destroyed, King Sojurim still doesn't know you. Thus, he can't possibly imagine that we are standing behind your back. This is our greatest weapon against him. Ma Yinlong spoke grimly. Wait a moment. Wang Chong suddenly interjected. Elder, didn't you just say that King Sojurim doesn't know me? Hehe. An idea suddenly came to my mind, following which Wang Chong revealed the idea he had. Ha ha ha, that works fine as well. Since you're going to do it big. The more forceful you shake the tree, the more unfathomable you will appear to King Sojurim. He might even underestimate you. Wang Gongzi, let's do as you have planned. Ma Yinlong chuckled after hearing Wang Chong's intentions. If they were to cooperate with Wang Chong on his plan, there would be a greater chance of success in the final operation. So, it'll be up to you next, Old Eagle. Old Eagle nodded his head grimly. So many years had passed. It was about time to exact vengeance for their fallen brothers. Hong Long. When news of more than a dozen of Gogurian bases being destroyed spread out, a huge uproar was incited in the capital. It was no secret that there were spies from the other countries in Great Tang, but never had there been a power who established such a huge spy network in their country like the Gogurian Empire. Especially when the corpses came into public view, an even larger uproar broke out. An army of 500 to 600 soldiers, this was already at the scale of a small rebellion's army. Furthermore, based on the news from the royal court, the bases they had established had more than a dozen years of history behind them. It was unimaginable how much destruction they had caused with these bases of operation. In fact, the night assault at Kunwu training camp was likely to be their handiwork. As well, The large sabers these Gogrian soldiers were equipped with proved the greatest evidence of their identities. It solidified the rumors of the vile plans the Gogrian warriors had in the capital. The Imperial army was mobilized to comb through the capital to capture those who had managed to escape from their net that night. This was especially so for the city's west, where most of the Gogurians lived. A huge army was dispatched to search the entire area thoroughly. Against the rage of the citizens, the usually ferocious Gogurians chose to keep a low profile and cooperated docilely with the army. Time and time again, they assured the authorities that they were proper merchants, and they were very different from assassins and warriors who caused destruction in the capital. Within a single day, a huge number of Gogurians were captured. Oddly enough, the merchants from the western regions and the other nations chose to maintain silence. They had also noticed that the nature of this incident was very different from those that had happened before. Destruction and assassination, this wasn't the scope of work a proper merchant should be involved in. Not to mention, a nation's security had been severely breached. The usual protests they had used couldn't and shouldn't be applied to this event. As the matter regarding the Gogurians created a huge storm throughout the capital, more and more details of the cleanup were being revealed. Rumor had it that the one in charge of that operation yesterday night was an Imperial Army commander known as Li Lin. Due to this matter, he was complimented in the Imperial Army and was even promoted to a Grade 5 Dragonfang commander. However, the person who broke into the network of Gogrian spies within the capital was a name which the citizens couldn't be any more familiar with: Wang Chong. It was him who found some clues from the Kunwu night assault and tracked down the Gogrians' hiding spot and bases. Eventually, he brought in the Imperial Army to clear them out. It could be said that Wang Chong was the true meritorious subject behind the veil. Bastard! At the gathering point on an unknown mountain beyond the walls of the capital, an austere figure smashed his fist into a table as a fearsome aura flowed out from him. 6 trembling figures kneeled before him in fear. Such a huge operation. And you all didn't notice a single thing beforehand? There wasn't any light in the room. That austere figure leaned forward slightly, and a cold gleam could be seen in his eyes even in the deep darkness. The powerful pressure that he exerted would leave anyone trembling in fear. Reporting to Your Highness, their operation was very abrupt and there wasn't any news beforehand. Furthermore, they mobilized the Imperial Army for the operation and attacked all of the bases simultaneously in the middle of the night, when our brothers were laxist. As such, we didn't have any time to make any countermeasures and escape. The person who planned the operation is a formidable strategist. He made sure to seal every single possible path of escape. One of the black-robed assassin kneeling on the floor reported. There was only a person who could be addressed as Your Highness by the Gogurians outside the Gogrian Empire. Without a doubt, the austere man in the room was the chief spy in Great Tang, King Sojurim. Our base couldn't possibly be exposed that easily. Did anyone find any signs of involvement from the Fang of the White Tiger? King Sojurim uttered coldly in the darkness. A chilly aura seemed to cover the entire room. Having more than a dozen bases destroyed in a single night, this was truly disastrous. His first thought was that perhaps the experts from the Bureau of Military Personnel and Bureau of Punishments had been involved in the operation. Only those old foes could possess such an in-depth understanding of their operations. None at all. When the incident happened, our men investigated the surroundings and they saw no hints of the Fang of the White Tiger or his peers. Another Gogrian assassin reported. Even though more than a dozen bases were destroyed overnight, they still had men scattered throughout the city. However, it was indeed true that the bulk of their manpower was stationed in those bases. When the matter happened, most of the bases were set ablaze, so it was impossible for the others located throughout the city to be unaware of the matter. Even though they dared not approach the scene, they still scouted the area from afar. As such, they managed to gather significant intelligence on the operation yesterday night. Could this really be just a coincidence? King Sojurim narrowed his eyes and different emotions flickered across his face. However, his actions seemed to induce even more fear in the Gogrian assassins as they lowered their heads even lower. Even though we can't confirm the matter, based on the news we have received, it is likely that this is just a coincidence. Also, we have some results regarding the matter which your highness had us look into previously. The third Gogrian spy said as he took out a book from his chest and passed it forward respectfully. Each of the Gogurians stationed in the capital had their own scope of responsibility, and his was clearly intelligence. The entire room was silent. King Sojurim paused for 3 seconds before grabbing the scroll from the Gogrian assassin's hands, and upon the very first glance, his expression immediately warped slightly in astonishment. He continued spinning through the pages silently as he read on. Your Highness, we have gathered some information on that Wang Chong from last night. He's the grandson of Great Tang's Duke Jiu, and the Imperial Army commander behind yesterday's operation is his uncle, Li Lin. The both of them share an intimate relationship. He might be young, but he isn't a person we can underestimate. Be it the Consortation incident or the regional commander's incident, there are signs of his involvement behind them. In fact, the head of the Yao clan, Yao Chong, even lowered his head to his nemesis Wang Jiuling, due to him. From the looks of it, this young man possesses extraordinary capabilities. He isn't like the typical scions in the capital. On top of that, he also has an intimate relationship with Great Tang's Kingsong, and he has been seen entering the Kingsong residence on many occasions. Without a doubt, the Imperial Army from the royal court yesterday night was mobilized using King Song's influence. Otherwise, given his uncle's standing, it is impossible for him to be given command over such a large group of Imperial soldiers. Also, our men found traces of him at the site of the operations. However, due to the presence of several experts around him, we didn't dare to move recklessly. More importantly, we also found his records at Kunwu training camp. He is a recruit at White Tiger Peak, where our troops were first defeated. At this point, the third assassin suddenly paused before continuing on grimly. Also, by interrogating some of the recruits in Kunwu training camp, we confirmed that he had led a group of men to the other peaks to offer support. Deep killing intent emanated from the words of the assassin. At the same instant, the killing intents of the other 5 men also flared up. There was no doubt about the situation anymore. Even though the eradication of over a dozen of their bases over the course of a single night sounded inconceivable, given the history of that Wang Chong, it wasn't entirely impossible. A person who could cause such a huge uproar in the Great Tang royal court couldn't be analyzed from the perspective of an ordinary man. He might be young, but he wasn't a person who should be gauged by his age anymore. No matter what he did at this point, it didn't seem impossible anymore. The entire room plunged into silence. Be it King Sojurim or the 6 Gogrian assassins, none of them spoke a single word. The news they had just received was significant. Ever since the fall of the Fong of the White Tiger more than a dozen years ago, they had never met with such a formidable opponent in the capital. And the only difference between him and the Fong of the White Tiger was that the Fong of the White Tiger failed. The young man named Wang Chong was only in his teens, and yet he had already given them 2 lethal blows and a death toll of more than 700 men. Compared to the Fong of the White Tiger back then, Wang Chong looked far more dangerous. To both the Gogrian Empire and the spies stationed in the capital, this wasn't good news. Everyone knew what this meant. That Wang Chong must be eliminated at all cost, or else he would pose a huge threat to Goguryeo in the future. Have you checked the final base? Is it safe? Are there suspicious men loitering in the area? After a long period of time, it was King Sojurim who first broke the silence. His tone was contemplative and reeked of schemes. We have looked into it, and there are no suspicious men loitering in the area. Most likely, Great Tang hasn't found this base yet, so it should still be safe, one of the assassins replied. King Sojurim remained silent, but those who were familiar with him could see the tenseness in his gaze slackening significantly. Compared to the entire Gogrian Empire, those bases were nothing. It mattered not whether all of their men had died or not. However, the fact that this base wasn't uncovered by the other party had great significance. It seems like he's still too young. King Sojurim lifted his gaze and sneered coldly inwardly. Gather the warriors of the Empire. King Sojurim stood up and instructed. Wang. The 6 men in the room immediately shook as they raised their shocked gazes. Your Highness, are we going to move now? But Great Tang's guard is up against us at this very moment. I fear that we might incur huge losses should we move at this moment. Everyone was astonished. They knew that King Sojurim wasn't the type to give up on his plans easily. But who could have thought that he would immediately rush into action when everything was tense? Humph! Within the truth hides illusions, and within illusions hide the truth. Great Tang may look like it's on its guard at this very moment, but in truth, their guards could be said to be down as well. They would never expect us to engage in assassinations while their men are combing through the entire city. King Sojurim raised his gaze majestically. His voice wasn't exceptionally loud, and it held compelling authority. Return an eye for an eye. This is how we Gogurians have always operated. Retaliation, this is the best response we can give to their aggression, as well the best consolation we can offer to the warriors who have passed away. For the glory of our empire, what does personal sacrifice count as? It's the greatest glory for a warrior to give his life up for the empire. The empire will remember and honor their efforts forever. His words had strangled everyone's objections. Respect immediately gleamed in the eyes of the 6 assassins. Yes, Your Highness. 3 days later, when the final group of warriors arrives, we'll make our move. Also, add the Wang clan into our hit list as well. Since we are going to kill the influential officials of Great Tang, why don't we clear out that pesky clan while we're at it? Those who try to overstep their boundaries will have to pay for their sins. King Sojurim harumphed coldly as he walked down from his throne. Yes, after his departure, silence returned to the darkness. The mountainous wind raged angrily. While King Sojurim and the group of Gogrian assassins were planning their next course of action, no one noticed a huge eagle circling the sky right above them within the deep darkness. That eagle remained completely silent, but its sharp eyes seemed to be engraving everything it saw into its memory. So, after an unknown length of time, the eagle finally left the area, flying to the northeast amidst the furious gale. Shoo shoo! The huge eagle flew across the crown of a tree as it descended, eventually reaching a small hill amidst the mountain. A thick arm stretched out to allow the trained, intelligent eagle. At the same time, the other hand threw a piece of meat jerky over. The huge eagle caught the meat jerky and swallowed it with a few forceful bites. To think that the Gogrian base would actually be there, beside the old eagle whose arm the eagle was perched on. Solitary Wolf grabbed his lower jaw as a dazed expression surfaced on his face. His gaze was directed to the scenery in the distance, where the tip of a monastery could be vaguely seen amidst the winding mountains. These Gogurians sure are cunning, to actually take a monastery deep in the mountains as their base. If we haven't known of it in advance, who would have thought that this would be their base of operations? Steel Arms couldn't help but feel relieved. If not for Old Eagle's trained eagles following the ravens that the Gogurians used to communicate into this monastery, he would have never thought that the Gogurians would be hiding here. I remember a merchant reporting to the royal court that he would donate to have a monastery built in the middle of the mountains 4 months ago. From the looks of it now, they had started their preparations all the way from back then. Wang Chong looked at the southwest direction and saw the massive monastery too, and a deep frown immediately appeared on his forehead. This monastery was rather famous in his previous life too, but who could have thought that it would actually be a gathering point for the Gogurians? Thinking about it now, this monastery probably played an important role as to why King Sojurim was able to escape from Great Tang's pursuit and successfully return back to Goguryeo. Since this monastery is the gathering point of the Gogurians, then without a doubt, the merchant who donated to it must be a Gogurian as well. I heard that the workers he recruited also prohibited outsiders from approaching the area during the construction. Most probably, the monks and the construction workers are all Gogurians as well. Given how huge an affair it is, the Gogurians couldn't possibly have delegated the jobs to outsiders. A strong wind blew across the small hill, brushing by the grim faces of the group. King Sojurim was much more cunning than they had thought. Even if something were to happen, no one would lay doubt on this monastery. After all, everything was done openly. The establishment of the monastery was officially reported, and it was constructed beneath the eyelids of the royal court, so there was no reason for the royal court to suspect this monastery. No matter how many people they brought and how cunning they are, this operation is bound to be a failure. Old Eagle. How is the situation? Ma Yinlong turned to ask Old Eagle, who was busy feeding his eagle. Not very good. They have sentry every 3 steps and patrol every 5. I'm afraid that we would be noticed by the Gogurians before we can even approach the monastery. Not only so, this area is filled with flora and fauna, and the geography is complicated, thus making it easy for him to escape. Even if the Gogurians were to realize that their plan was doomed, they could simply abandon the monastery and escape whenever they wished to. Old Eagle replied grimly as he fed the last piece of meat jerky to the eagle perched on his arm. The wariness of the Gogurians was far greater than he had expected. There was no opening he could see that they could exploit. Under such circumstances, it was nearly impossible for them to approach the monastery. Before their army could even get close, their target would have long escaped. Hearing Old Eagle's words, everyone frowned. As long as they didn't resolve this problem, it would be nearly impossible for their mission to succeed, even though they had found the Gogurians' last gathering point. Not only so, have you forgotten about the elites they have dispatched over? Since King Sojurim intends to deal with the influential officials, the troops he brought over are the top-notch experts of Goguryeo. In fact, some of them are even of commander rank. If we don't have sufficient manpower, we might just end up being wiped out by them instead. Steel Arms said grimly. It was due to his carelessness that he lost an arm a dozen years ago. The harsh lesson he had gone through then was still deeply engraved in his mind. Gongzi, there's a matter that you must take note of. The Gogurians that we eliminated in the previous few bases are just ordinary warriors. On the other hand, the assassins that King Sojurim is going to deploy for assassinating the influential officials are all elites from Goguryeo. If we want to clean them up, we must be exceptionally careful. None of us can bear the consequences should our mission fails. The Gogurian incident had caused a huge storm in the capital, and everyone's attention was on it. This included those from the foreigners such as those from the western regions as well. If this operation were to fail and the Gogurians managed to escape, the reputation of the Wang clan would surely plummet greatly. Leave minor affairs such as this to me. After a moment of contemplation, Wang Chong smiled. I'll liaise with the royal court through King Song and have them send the most elite troops they have. As long as I tell them that the matter from more than a decade ago is about to happen once more so that they understand the severity of the matter, the royal court should know what to do. The matter that happened more than a decade ago had caused a crushing blow on the royal court, and it was still fresh in the mind of most of the older officials. In truth, Wang Chong wouldn't have too much. He believed that just by describing the situation, the influential officials would surely be rushing forward to offer their strongest men to him. There was no need for him to worry about the issue regarding manpower. Ma Yinlong, Old Eagle, Steel Arms, and Solitary Wolf glanced at one another, awed. This was exactly the power of possessing influence and a strong background. To them, this matter, which could be done with a few words on Wang Chong's part, was completely unachievable for them. At least, if they had connections like Wang Chong's, they wouldn't have suffered such a tragic defeat back then, and their brothers wouldn't end up laying the groundwork for King Sojurim's greatness. They also wouldn't have been plagued nightmares for the nights to come. Regretful as they may be, they also felt relieved to have a scion on their side. This had brought them much convenience in their operations. Not to mention, the 4 of them had also been expelled from the Bureau of Military Personnel and Bureau of Punishments, so they could only count on Wang Chong on this matter anyway. We also have to find a way to deal with the sentries as well. This is crucial to the success of the operation. Steel Arms said. Don't worry. They won't get away. Wang Chong chuckled. He raised a finger and started drawing on the ground. His abrupt action immediately attracted the attention of the crowd. I just gave it some thoughts, and given the terrain around the monastery, there is no need for us to encircle the entire area. As long as we deploy an army over here and here to jam the path, they won't be able to get away. Wang Chong swiftly drew out a rough map of the terrain. Having spent the latter half of his previous life in battlefields, he was extremely familiar with the mountains and rivers across the Central Plains. Even veterans like Ma Yinlong, Solitary Wolf, and the others were also not too familiar with the terrain, and yet, a youth like Wang Chong was able to draw it out so casually. Deep within, they were astonished. But how do we do it? It's impossible for such a large army to be mobilized without alarming the Gogurians. As soon as an army leaves the city gates, King Sojurim would surely be on his guard. Ma Yinlong said. Wang Chong's idea was good, but it wasn't too practical. Who said anything about deploying the imperial army within the capital? Wang Chong burst into laughter. Every year, the Bureau of Military Personnel will have a regular reshuffling of personnel. At that moment, we'll just have to slip in some elite troops within the group and have an army head northward. Bureau of Military Personnel? The few men glanced at one another in shock. The idea of using the reshuffling of personnel of the Bureau of Military Personnel to surround the Gogurians was inconceivable to the four of them. As the foundation of a nation, the military must be managed with prudence. There wasn't a single order from the Bureau of Military Personnel that could be taken lightly. Thus, Wang Chong's idea was something that could have never crossed their mind. Yet, Wang Chong spoke of it so lightly as though it was nothing at all. It's not that I want to fearmonger, but have you thought of the consequences of having the influential officials of the royal court slaughtered? Surely some falsified deployment is nothing in comparison with that. Orders are just mere words, whereas we are alive. If the outcome turns out to be well, the means would be accepted by everyone else. Besides, this doesn't have to be large-scale military personnel redeployment. The men just have to head to the closest fortress to the capital. This way, the impact would be reduced to the minimum. Aware of what the four were thinking about, Wang Chong explained. The four contemplated silently for a moment, and eventually, they nodded in agreement. If it was just a small-scale redeployment, it would still be acceptable to them. What's left is King Sojurim then. In that instant, the atmosphere grew grim. This time, even Wang Chong had fallen silent. It wasn't that he was unwilling to offer any ideas, but that there was nothing worthy he could offer. He had never met King Sojurim before and didn't know of the other party's appearance. Needless to say, formulate a plan to capture him. Under such circumstances, even if King Sojurim were to be standing before him, Wang Chong would still be unable to recognize him. How could he possibly lead a team to capture or slay a person he couldn't even recognize? Not only so, from the previous few confrontations, putting aside King Sojurim's viciousness, he was also a sly fox. This monastery before them served as the greatest evidence to that. Old Eagle, I'll be depending on you then. When our operation begins, you'll have to send all of your eagles out to keep a lookout for the Gogurians who manage to escape our encirclement. We mustn't allow even a single one of them to escape. You should know that this is probably our last chance. Old Eagle, Steel Arms, and Solitary Wolf nodded their heads grimly, and they shared a gaze that left an ominous feeling within Wang Chong. Wang Chong opened his mouth to say something, but he eventually closed it without saying a word. Without alarming anyone, the five of them retreated silently from the mountain forest. Regardless of whether it was the Gogurians or Wang Chong, both sides were hastening their preparations. Even though Wang Chong didn't know the Gogurians had brought forward their plans, and the Gogurians didn't know that Wang Chong and group were planning to strike their nest. Even though neither sides have realized it yet, it had already turned into a race of time. If the Gogurians were to launch an assault before Wang Chong and group were done with their preparations, the operation would be a tragic failure. One must know that the monastery was simply too close to the capital. Similarly, if Wang Chong and the others could finish getting the various parties to work together with them and deploy the necessary troops in the crucial regions, the Gogurians would be bound for failure. At such a crucial moment, no one was willing to conduct any intelligence gathering by capturing the other side's men and interrogating them. This was simply way too dangerous. They risked alarming the other party by doing so. 3 days passed swiftly. It's finally accomplished. Within a massive monastery on the mountain beyond the capital stood a bald Gogurian warrior dressed in a cassock, feigning as a monk. He sighed deeply, and the excitement in his voice couldn't be concealed. It had taken some time, but they were finally done with their preparations. The top-notch experts from Goguryeo who would be assassinating the influential officials from Great Tang had all arrived at the monastery. Soon, Great Tang would find itself shrouded in a storm of bloodshed. All those who managed to climb to an influential position had well-guarded residences filled with experts. Assassinating them was no easy feat. This was the reason why they had to go the way out to bring in the best experts from their empire. To them, this was no longer a simple assassination mission. Rather, it was a war they had to win at all costs for the sake of their homeland. Everyone knew that it would be hard for them to get out of this alive, and they had already mustered their will to fight to the last breath. "Are you all ready?" The Gogrian dressed as a monk raised his arm and yelled. In an instant, loud cheerings crashed into the surroundings. "We are ready. For the Empire." Looking down from the sky, the monk was surrounded by many black-clothed Gogrian elites with 3 sabers hanging behind them. Their exposed sharp eyes gleamed in passion, excitement, and frenzy. The killing intent that they had welled up felt as though a massive tsunami crashing down into the area. A long, elaborate preparation spanning over a course of 4 months had finally been completed. More than 1,000 brave warriors of their empire had gathered here in this massive monastery. Furthermore, unlike the Gogrian warriors who were killed in those bases back then, they were the true experts, true elites of the Gogrian army. They were handpicked from thousands of their peers. 15 years ago, another group of elites of such scale had caused a river of blood to flow through Great Tang's capital before escaping safely. Today, history will repeat itself. For His Majesty, for Your Highness, for the greatness of Goguryeo, kill. Amidst passionate shoutings, the 1,000 or so masked Gogrian assassins drew their sabers and pointed it to the heavens. Beneath the starlight, the sword shone with bone-chilling gleams. Boom! In the next instant, the Gogrian experts began leaping over the high walls of the monastery, headed toward Great Tang's capital. Go, my brave warriors! Make Great Tang bleed at its core. Amidst a strong gale, 3 powerful auras suddenly surged from the roof of the monastery. At this moment, their figures felt reminiscent of a mountain. The 3 of them gazed at the huge army of Gogurians beneath who was charging forward, and in their eyes shone a gleam so bright that even the stars would pale before it. All arrangements were made and done. The tunnel into the city was under the management of their own men, and a group of experts would enter first. Even if some kind of accident occurs and a patrol squad were to notice their presence, they would surely be able to purge the squad swiftly, preventing any news from leaking out. And after tonight, Great Tang would fall into disarray, whereas the Gogrian Empire would hold them as their pride. Just as the group of men gazed in the distance with ambitious thoughts, a change abruptly occurred. Amidst the night, a brilliant firework suddenly whizzed into the sky from afar. A brilliant light with a long trail of smoke. Even from afar, it was extremely conspicuous. What's going on? On the roof of the monastery, the 3 men suddenly froze in astonishment. And they weren't the only ones. The Gogrian experts who were charging forward were also dumbstruck. With their gazes in the sky, they subconsciously came to a halt. This was the wilderness, a significant distance away from the capital. It should be impossible for such fireworks to appear here. And today wasn't a festival of any sort either. It was impossible for fireworks to appear here. In that instant, the heaven and earth fell silent. The cheerings disappeared into the void. Only the furious wind continued to rage on above them. A hint of unease surfaced in everyone's hearts. But the surroundings were completely silent. Other than the firework that rushed into the air, nothing peculiar happened at all. That single instant felt like an eon to everyone here. Just as everyone was wondering why nothing was happening at all, the next instant, boom! It was as if huge intangible hands were shaking the entire mountain range, sending innumerable birds fluttering into the sky. Charge! Deafening war cries tremored the mountains. In the next moment, amidst the shocked gazes of countless Gogurians, the Great Tang Imperial Army Guards suddenly charged in from all directions. How is this possible? On the roof of the monastery, the faces of the 3 Gogrian experts immediately warped in shock, and they nearly fell from the roof. This is impossible. How can there be so many guards here? How in the world did they get here? Where are our patrols? Where are our damned patrols? Those bastards are already here. Why didn't they send any signal at all? Be careful. It's an enemy attack. Desolate, panicked, and furious Kogurion echoed in the air. In an instant, the Gogrian army fell into chaos. What they thought they would be facing were the powerful guards of those influential officials, not a standard army of Great Tang Imperial Army. What that should have been an assassination operation had turned into a true war now. For the glory of our empire, kill those bastards. Clang, clang, clang. Some Gogrian elites quickly recovered from their shock and drew their sabers immediately to put up a defensive pose. However, they were still a step too slow. Hong, hong, hong. Before the Gogrian elites could react, they were already impaled in the chest by a thick steel arrow, pinning them firmly onto the ground. Master archers. Be careful. Those bastards have master archers with them. A desolate cry echoed in the air, only to be extinguished at the next moment. That Gogrian was shot in his forehead, dying instantaneously. Defend! Those who were deployed here were all the elites of the Gogrian Empire. After the initial attack, they swiftly scattered to look for cover before swiftly retreating backward. Their figures flitted among the various tree trunks with astounding agility that few could rival. Charge! But before they could retreat back to the monastery, the neighing of war steeds reverberated in the air, and the first wave of Imperial Army cavalry charged forth. These steeds were cloaked with a steel armor, and every single one of them was exceptionally tall. Their powerful bodies harnessed the incredible might reminiscent of a monster, allowing them to even knock down trees that stood in their way. It seemed as though there was nothing that could stop their charge. Hong long long. In just an instant, the two powers collided with one another. Two different types of martial halos lit up simultaneously before clashing against one another. The immense force crushed even the trees in the surroundings into shreds, and wooden shavings cloaked the air 10 zhong high. Congratulations to user for killing 691 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 692 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 693 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. On the other hand, on a small hill not too far away, Wang Chong stood beneath a lush tree. A familiar voice sounded in his head once more, and his bane of the battlefield aura began growing again. A war-type halo. Indeed, the best way to grow it is through war as well. Amidst frenzied wind, Wang Chong felt his strength growing at a rapid pace. Every single cell of his body was nourished with a powerful energy, leaving him incredibly energized. This kind of method that allows his strength to grow without doing anything was truly too pleasurable. It's a pity that I'm only one of the commanders in this battle. The true commander is the man over there. Wang Chong turned his gaze over to a certain direction. There an austere-looking Imperial Army general sat above a towering steed. His gaze was directed to the front, and he carried an overwhelming disposition of valiance. Clearly, he had been on a large-scale battle in the battlefield before. He was the man that the royal court dispatched here. Even though Wang Chong was favored by King Song, he wasn't a member of the Imperial Army. In order to prevent the Gogurians from escaping, too many Imperial Army members had to be mobilized for the operation, and so, a sufficiently high-ranked Imperial Army commander had to be dispatched over. He was the true commander of this battle. Thus, it couldn't be helped that the benefits Wang Chong could obtain from this battle would be thinned. However, it was fortunate that King Song's token was still in his hands, and this base was also found by Wang Chong. Thus, he would still be granted the greatest rewards from this operation. It's fortunate that I called Uncle over. After this operation, he should be promoted once more. With this contribution, his qualification would exceed many others, and it would only be a matter of time before he rises through the ranks. Wang Chong turned over and gazed at Uncle Li Lin in the distance, who had led the army up to the monastery. A hint of a smile crept onto his lips. Even if Wang Chong didn't gain the right to lead the army, he still wanted his uncle to claim the greatest credit. Brothers, charge! Don't waste too much time with them. Remember, our goal is King Sojurim. No matter what, we mustn't allow him to escape. Just as Wang Chong was in the midst of contemplation, he suddenly heard a loud bellow by his ears, following which, the galloping of horses echoed in the air. Before Wang Chong could stop them, Ma Yinlong, Solitary Wolf, Steel Arms, and Old Eagle charged forward on their steeds with reddened eyes, leaving a cloud of dust behind them. Wang Chong intended to have them enter the battlefield a little later, but the four of them simply couldn't remain seated when their mortal enemy was right before them. After some thought, he decided to allow them to go. Having stifled themselves for more than a dozen years, it would be a wonder if they would hold themselves back. In the distance, the battle was slowly closing onto the monastery. Boom! At that moment, the ground trembled. Suddenly, Wang Chong could perceive an overwhelmingly powerful aura gushing out from the direction of the monastery. Peculiarities occurred wherever the invisible aura touched. One after another, the ground beneath the Gogrian assassin's feet suddenly lit up, and a mysterious thorn-shaped halo suddenly appeared. Then, the second one, and finally the third one. The monastery shook for a total of 3 times, and 3 brilliant halos lit up beneath the assassins. General! There are official Gogrian commanders in the monastery. Seeing the halos lighting up the darkness, the crowd at the hill was shocked. Even Wang Chong couldn't help but blink in short. If one were to train a war halo up to a certain point, one would be able to affix it to one's subordinates. This was the greatest trait of a war halo. This was also where the name came from. However, only those whose cultivations have reached an impressive level would be able to do so. And this kind of commander, regardless whether it was in Goguryeo, Great Tang, Yusang, or Abbasid Caliphate, were all viewed highly. No empire would be willing to sacrifice them so easily. If a commander of this tier were to die here, it would be a significant loss to Goguryeo. The Goguryans sure have put their all into this matter. Wang Chong sneered coldly. Without a doubt, this was the work of those leaders whom Old Eagle scouted in the monastery. Considering how the Goguryans had even brought out commanders of this tier, they were clearly determined to succeed in this operation. Indeed, compared to a direct battle on the battlefield, this kind of operations reap greater results for a smaller investment. Boom! As soon as the 3 Goguryan heads released their war halo to cover all of the Goguryans, the Imperial Army head commander of the operation drove his steed forward, and with a slight jolt, he activated his war halo as well, and a blinding light covered all of the Imperial Army guards in an instant. Charge! In the distance, a frenzied gale blew ceaselessly, and innumerable cries shook the heavens. Halos clashed with halos and stellar energy collided with stellar energy. As the soldiers of the 2 factions clashed against one another, the battle swiftly intensified. On the surface, Great Tang seemed to be in the absolute advantage, but the Goguryans were retaliating vigorously as well. The anticipated swift breach of their defenses didn't happen. They managed to make use of the complicated terrain and the dense forest to their advantage. Furthermore, these Goguryans were swift, dexterous, and fierce. Their vicious 3-saber school fighting technique allowed them to stand their ground, thus causing the battle to make little progress. Humph! They are still holding on despite being in such a situation? Wang Chong sneered coldly. The Goguryans were truly an obstinate bunch. No matter what desperate kind of situation they were put under, they would still fight on relentlessly so as to return the favor to their enemies. It didn't matter whether it was a 1-to-1 duel or a group fight such as this. However, if the Goguryans really thought that they could stand against so many people with just their 1,000 elites in this terrain, they were being way too hopeful. Wang Chong abruptly lifted his leg and stomped down. Hong long long the world shook. In an instant, an invisible ripple spread out across the mountain range with Wang Chong at its center. Just at this time, the effects of the ripple were not directed at the Imperial Army but the opposing Goguryans. Wherever the ripple passes, the Goguryans in the area would find the halo beneath their feet suddenly vanishing. This abrupt change shook the entire army. It wasn't easy for the Goguryans to reorganize themselves and put up a defensive line, but this abrupt change caused them to descend into chaos instantly. Without the support of the halo, the Goguryans immediately suffered heavy casualties. Not too far away, noticing the changes in the battlefield, The austere imperial army general turned his face over for the first time and gazed deeply into Wang Chong in astonishment. However, Wang Chong didn't have the attention to bother with him at the moment. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded in his head once more. Congratulations to user for killing 721 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 722 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 723 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 834 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 835 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 836 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. A huge bunch of notices bombarded Wang Chong, and the bane of the battlefield halo within him grew significantly within a very short period of time. You are being too naive if you think that you can stand against an army of the Imperial Army's tier that easily in Great Tang's territory. Wang Chong sneered. As long as he was present, the Goguryans' hopes of holding their ground with their elites would never come to be. He would never give them such an opportunity. Myasame Ayaka, tell them to make preparations. We'll be joining the battlefield very soon, Wang Chong said. Yes, Gongzi. Receiving the orders, Myasame Ayaka turned around and left. Wang Chong didn't wield much authority in this battlefield. The bulk of the authority was with the Imperial Army General. However, through utilizing King Song's token, he still managed to gain command over a small group of Imperial Army. While Wang Chong wasn't a military officer, he was confident that there were very few in the entire world who could grasp the flow of a battle in a war as well as him. Offense for defense, advance for retreat. These Goguryans sure are smart. They know that if they were to flee now, their deaths would only come faster. By then, none of them would be able to get away. Thus, they formed a defensive line first to stand their ground first before finding a way to break through the encirclement forcefully later on. It's a good plan, but too bad it isn't feasible, Wang Chong sneered. There were indeed many formidable figures within this group of Goguryans. Despite the abrupt attack, they were able to reorganize their troops swiftly to withstand the onslaught. After which, they could focus their forces on a single point to breach the encirclement and escape. Given their fighting prowess as elites of their empire, that was indeed the best course of action. However, given that Wang Chong was here, they were doomed to fail. He would never give them such a chance. To pit their military strategies against his. They would only be humiliated. Gongzi, I finished gathering the men. A voice sounded behind him. Myasame Ayaka kneeled on the floor with a lowered head. Behind her were around 100 valiant Imperial Army cavalrymen. Riding on their steeds, they gradually appeared on the hill. They were all well-built, and they exuded an extraordinarily powerful aura boasting superior strength that would allow them to challenge 100 men simultaneously. They were all elites specially chosen by Wang Chong from the Imperial Army. Prepare yourself. Arrow Vanguard Formation. Wang Chong grabbed the steed beside him and leaped onto it. Then, he drew his sword and pointed forward with a sharp gaze. Somehow, the Imperial Army suddenly felt awe while looking at Wang Chong's back. Initially, when they heard they were to come under him, they were fearful that he might blindly command them. But Wang Chong's current majestic disposition had dispelled the doubts they harbored in their minds. At this moment, he felt like a veteran general who had been put through hundreds of battles. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Wang Chong gazed into the distance without moving at all. After an unknown period of time, just when everyone was thinking that the sword in Wang Chong's hand would never cut down, the long-awaited order finally arrived. Charge! Like ferocious tigers, the 100 cavalry charged forward amidst deafening calls from their steeds. They surrounded Wang Chong, Myasame Ayaka, and the others, and they advanced furiously as though an arrow shot out from this very hill. Hong long long. The ground trembled as the scenery flashed by their sides and their wind roared by their ears. The galloping and neighing of the horse, the blazing sparks in the distance, and the cold gleam of the weapons. In that instant, Wang Chong felt his heart beating wildly. His consciousness drifted to a faraway time-space continuum, and he felt a jolt in the depths of his soul. The battlefield was summoning him. The battlefield, this was where he belonged. Wang. As though some kind of miracle, an opening suddenly appeared within the formation of the Gogurians. Hong Long. In the next instant, the 100 cavalry that Wang Chong led stabbed deep into the opening and tore it into a gaping hole. The immense might from the charge of the cavalry sent the Gogurian assassins flying one after another. Kill them! A deafening war cry resounded in the heaven, and in just a split instant, the defense line of the Gogurians was cut into two halves. In an instant they descended into chaos. Bastard! The faces of the few Gogurians' head, standing at the roof of the monastery, darkened. Wang Chong's charge had rendered their previous efforts completely useless. Their faces turned cold, and the intent to wipe out this group of cavalry sprouted within them. However, the ferocious army of Great Tang came pouring in at this instant, and they found themselves preoccupied. This time they had to join the battle themselves as well. Prepare yourselves. We'll be going in once more. After charging past the hordes of Gogurian troops, Wang Chong's elite cavalry came to a halt at another hill and gazed coldly down at the Gogurians. From Wang Chong's point of view, he could see the Gogurians slowly reining in their formation to rebuild their defense line. However, this didn't make a difference to him at all. He could already see it. One more charge and they would be completely defeated. War is something very different from assassination. From the moment that the situation turned into a war battle, the Gogurians were already caught in his tempo. Prepare yourself, the second charge. Hong Long. When Wang Chong led the 100 elite cavalry through the Gogurian formation once more, the army of 1,000 Gogurian elites finally collapsed. They found themselves unable to form a proper defense line anymore. It broke down into a situation where they had their hands full with just preserving their lives. If the Gogurian elites were unable to regroup, then no matter how numerous they were or how powerful they were individually, it would be impossible for them to stand against an entire army. From the moment that Wang Chong charged through their formation for the second time and scattered their formation, the fate of the 1,000 Gogurian elites were already sealed. Retreat! Everyone, retreat! Everyone fled chaotically as though birds scattering into the surroundings. No one wanted to retreat to the monastery. They would only be completely trapped then. Boom! On the other hand, Wang Chong's troops pursued the Gogurians, who were marked by brilliant halos in the dark night. In truth, they could have posed a threat were they to retaliate. However, with their minds fixed on escaping, death only came faster for them. Congratulations to user for killing 836 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 1111 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 1112 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 1113 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 1257 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 1258 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 1259 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. A whole bunch of notices cascaded down Wang Chong's head. His bane of the battlefield grew to a radius of more than 10,000 meters, and it continued to expand outward swiftly. The adrenaline from having his strength growing rapidly left Wang Chong feeling exhilarated. Another 700, and I would be able to reach level 2 for it, Wang Chong thought. It was getting harder and harder to upgrade his halo the further he progressed. Initially, Wang Chong only had to kill a single foreign soldier to activate his halo. But from level 0 to level 1, he had to kill 100 soldiers, and each of these soldiers had to possess a cultivation realm of at least origin energy tier 9. This was no easy task at all. On the other hand, to reach level 2, Wang Chong would have to kill 2,000 foreign soldiers. At level 1, Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield was a destructive nerfing force against all martial artists of true martial realm 1 Dan and below. However, its effects were limited against martial artists of true martial realm 2 Dan and above. If Wang Chong wanted to strip the martial halo off a true martial realm 2 Dan expert, His bane of the battlefield would have to reach level 2 first. Roar! While Wang Chong was in the midst of contemplating on the back of his horse, a furious howl suddenly echoed from the monastery. A huge gust of wind swept into the surroundings, blowing a huge wave of tree leaves down the mountain. It's from the monastery. They are currently crossing blows with the Gogrian heads. Mayasame Ayaka's voice whispered in his ear. The frenzied wind had left her night suit fluttering in the wind. Wang Chong glanced over and saw that the walls of the monastery had been knocked down. Within the monastery, Uncle Li Lin, Ma Yinlong, Old Eagle, Solitary Wolf, Steel Arms, and the austere Imperial Army commander dispatched from the royal court were currently engaged in an intense battle against the 3 Gogrian heads. Boom! 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 A deluge of stellar energy gushed out and covered the entire area. Everything that stood in its way, be it the walls, monastery, fake mountain, stone tablets, or dormitories, everything collapsed as weakly as though tofu. As various stellar energy clashed with one another, a huge tempest that rose up to several zhang high covered half of the entire monastery. Amidst this destructive storm of stellar energy, all of the Imperial Army soldiers were forced to retreat from the area around the monastery. Hoo! Several dozen zhang of flames gushed into the air, bringing a bright shade of crimson to the night sky. The saber chi and sword chi intermixed with it threatened to tear even heaven apart. Amidst the searing storm, one could even see some fearsome phenomenon. Even Mayasame Ayaka couldn't help but blink in astonishment looking at the huge storm on the hill, and she subconsciously retreated in fear. Profound martial realm. Mayasame Ayaka was very certain that all of them were profound martial realm experts. Even if that wasn't the case, it was certain that they weren't too far from that level. Because only profound martial realm experts could conjure up such a fearsome storm. They are strong, Mayasame Ayaka thought. It was impossible for a true martial realm to stand against a profound martial realm. If not for the numerical advantage and the presence of profound martial realm experts in the midst of the Imperial Army as well, she would never participate in a fight of this tier. Don't worry. Their fight won't affect us. Wang Chong smiled. Even though Mayasame Ayaka was skilled, she had never been on the battlefield before, so she wasn't very experienced with this. Soldier against soldier, general against general. While the others could escape, the 3 Gogrian heads couldn't possibly flee, needless to say, rush over here to get rid of them. This was also the reason why the Imperial Army General, which the royal court dispatched, had been waiting alongside Wang Chong before. This was also the same reason why the Gogrian heads didn't flee. It was impossible for Great Tang to let them get away. Unlike normal soldiers, many eyes were on them, and unless they were confident of getting away, they wouldn't escape. Boom! 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 Stellar energies that was far beyond the capability of any true martial realm expert clashed furiously, their fearsome shock wave diffusing into the surroundings. Even the entire mountain shook beneath the might of these top-notch experts. In just a short moment, the monastery which took 4 months to build was destroyed by 2/3. Shattered bricks and wooden fragments were swept into the air by the stellar energies, mixing together with the searing storm. Ever since his reincarnation, this was the first time Wang Chong was seeing a fight among profound martial realm experts. A battle of this fight was far beyond Wang Chong's tier, and it would be impossible for him, or any of his allies such as Mayasame Ayaka or the troops from the Zhuang clan and Qi clan to lend their assistance. However, it was still possible for him to slightly interfere in it. Call Luo Chong over, Wang Chong instructed with a smile. Luo Chong was the name of the brawny master archer whom King Song assigned to Wang Chong's side. It had taken him much effort before he managed to get the name out of the other party. That fellow was simply way too reticent. Gongzi. Amidst frenzied wind, the fully armored Luo Chong arrived behind Wang Chong with a specially crafted humongous bow behind his back. Standing at 2 meters tall, his presence was pressurizing in itself. As a subordinate highly regarded by a Qin Wang of Great Tang, Luo Chong's archery was indubitably formidable. In this battle, he had killed several times the number of true martial realm experts as compared to the master archers from the Imperial Army. This was a true disparity in capabilities. Without a doubt, Luo Chong was the strongest person he had here, as well as the one he trusted and relied on the most. Luo Chong. Can you see the situation within the monastery? Wang Chong pointed to the bottom of the hill and said. Those words immediately caught the attention of everyone around Wang Chong. The 100 elite cavalry troops that Wang Chong brought immediately turned their sights to him. It's useless, they're moving too quickly. Besides, the interference from the storm of stellar energy is too great. I fear that I might accidentally friendly fire. Luo Chang's voice echoed from within his thick armor. Wang Chong's intentions were clear. His thought was good, but it wasn't feasible. Every split second counts in the fight between experts. With Luo Chang's capability, he could pin the heads of true martial realm martial artists onto the ground with certainty. They wouldn't even have a chance to dodge at all. However, against profound martial realm experts such as the 3 Gogrian heads, the effectiveness of his arrows would be greatly lowered. Their reaction speed was simply too fast. Besides, his enemies and his allies were in close proximity to one another. In such close combat, the slightest error in one's actions could lead to one's death. Should his arrow miss, he could end up hindering his own allies instead. Furthermore, given the huge number of potential interferences to his arrows around the monastery, the tree leaves, soil, brick, wooden shavings, flames, saber chi, he wasn't entirely confident that his arrows would stay on his anticipated trajectory. Since that was the case, he was of little use at all. This was also the reason why he hadn't made a move despite seeing the battle in the monastery. Wang Chong was simply underestimating things. Do you see the toad's head behind the monastery? Wang Chong smiled as he suddenly lifted his fingers and pointed to the bottom of the hill. Toad's head. Luo Chong was taken aback. Along with many other astonished gazes, he turned to look in the direction where Wang Chong was pointing at. Of the 1/3 of the remaining monastery, at a part closest to the battlefield, there was indeed a toad standing at the top of the roof. In the construction of buildings, this kind of design was rather common. Just that, no one could understand how it would help them deal with the Gogurians. Later, when the flames blaze up to 11 zhang, I'll issue an order and you'll lower your wrist by 3 fon. For Li and 2 hao from the toad's glabella and shoot. With his hand behind his back, Wang Chong pointed at the distance and instructed confidently. Wang. Hearing Wang Chong's words, Luo Chang's heart suddenly jolted. A hint of astonishment reflected in his eyes. 3 fon, for Li and 2 hao, such precise measurement terms were used only by archers. As preciseness stood at the core of archery, there was very little room for errors in the values. Top-notch Imperial Army archery instructors would usually use such terms to correct the shooting position of their trainees. However, as everyone had different height, arm length, bow-wielding habit, and center of gravity, this correction had to be specially tailored to the individual. And to do so, one had to possess a deep understanding of archery. However, there wasn't the slightest archery callus on Wang Chong's hands. On top of that, he had never seen Wang Chong wield a bow before. He found it hard to believe that Wang Chong would possess an expertise in archery as well. But doubtful as he was, Wang Chong's confident expression and posture made it hard to doubt him. Xiao. Drawing a specially crafted arrow from his quiver and holding it between his forefinger and middle finger, Luo Chong doubtfully walked over to the place Wang Chong pointed at before knocking the shaft onto his bow. After which, he turned around to look at Wang Chong. Wang Chong found the sight rather hilarious. How could he possibly not know what Luo Chong was thinking? He indeed did not know much of archery, nor was he a master archer. However, he didn't need to rely on his archery talent to guide Luo Chong. Just his experience and sharp judgment were enough. Master one and you master all. Having neared the peak of martial arts in his previous life, peaking at St. Martial Realm Pinnacle, it was a walk in the park for him to gauge Luo Chong's height, arm length, and center of gravity so as to correct his shooting angle. He might only be at Origin Energy Tier 9 at the moment, but hidden within his young body was the bona fide soul of a St. Martial Realm Pinnacle martial artist. On the entire battlefield, he was the only one who was qualified to interfere in the battle within the monastery. Wait for my order. Wang Chong shot a glance over before turning around to staring intently at the scene of the monastery below, not moving in the slightest. However, his head was whirring into action. It has been too long, Wang Chong thought. This was the first time he made use of the experience from his previous life to interfere in a fight far beyond him. The mountain wind raged, rustling the trees and the shrubs. Wang Chong and the 100 Imperial Army cavalry remained motionless on top of the hill. Within the deep darkness of the night, it seemed like the huge uproar in the monastery had turned into the center of the world. After some time, "Release!" Wang Chong uttered sharply, and boom! A thick metal arrow whizzed out, seemingly ripping the sky into two. The intense wind from the sheer might of the arrow slapped on faces like whips. This was the first time Wang Chong and the others had seen Luo Chong in action beside him. In that instant, even the night sky seemed to have dimmed further. Wang, like a work of magic, amidst a shrill shout, a massive storm of crimson flames rushed into the sky. Behind the crimson flames, a figure miraculously leaped up and appeared at the point between Luo Chong and the toad on the roof. Hong Long. The arrow pierced through the chest of the Gogrian expert in an instant, and the astounding momentum of the arrow threw him out of the crimson storm. Wang. In that instant, the eyes of everyone on the hill widened in shock. Gongzi? Mayasame Ayaka turned around to stare at Wang Chong in shock, trying to reassess the young man before her. In this battle between profound martial realm experts, even she was unable to intervene at all. There were simply too many interfering factors. Yet, Wang Chong was able to accurately predict the moment when the Gogrian commander would leap out, as well as his position, and even issued precise instructions of Luo Chong to shoot him. She had never known Wang Chong to possess such capabilities. This is too incredible. To think that the Wang clan's heritage was this powerful. In truth, the 100 Imperial Army elites deployed under Wang Chong's command weren't too content with their role. Even though Wang Chong had led them on two crucial charges that destroyed the formation of the Gogurians, they still thought that he was too young and inexperienced to command them. But upon seeing this sight, every single one of them fell silent. Wasn't this youth of the Wang clan a little too formidable? But the one who was the most shocked of all was Luo Chong. Only he himself knew exactly what had happened. Every split second counts in the fight between experts. When he drew his arrow and released the bowstring, the Gogrian didn't step away from the surface of the ground at all. But as if Wang Chong had peered into the future, the Gogrian abruptly leapt up and fell into the trajectory path of his arrow. In that entire process, he did nothing more than to pull the arrow. All he did was lend his strength to Wang Chong. It is no wonder why His Highness King Song has such a high view of him. He really cannot be gauged through common sense. In that instant, countless thoughts flashed across Luo Chong's mind. He was a man in the field of archery, and only experts in the same field could win his respect. And at this very instant, Wang Chong had won his acknowledgement. Luo Chong finally understood why Wang Chong favored him so much. In his entire life, he had never seen a talent like that. "Lord!" A shout in Kagurion suddenly echoed from the monastery. Putting aside Luo Chong and the others, even the other Gogrian heads were stunned by the sight. The two Gogrian heads suddenly exerted a monstrous strength, and despite the numerical disadvantage, they pushed back Li Lin, Ma Yinlong, and the others, and immediately rushed in the direction where the Gogrian head was shot. "Seems like we shot quite a formidable figure," Wang Chong muttered in surprise. But soon, a smile crept up on his lips. "That works better for me." In truth, Luo Chong's arrow didn't kill the Gogrian head, but it did seal the conclusion of this fight. Outnumbered, the three Gogrian experts were already hard-pressed to stand their ground. With one severely injured, it wouldn't be long before they fell. More importantly, the arrow's impact also broke the intimate cooperation among them. It was due to this very cooperation that they withstood the combined might from the group for so long. Compared to how the allies on Wang Chong's side were fighting independently, the Gogrian warriors showed incredible synergy in their teamwork. Boom! With a resounding boom and a few cries of agony, the battle at the monastery finally came to an end. The three powerful Gogrian heads had finally fallen. The surroundings were a complete mess. Congratulations to user for killing grade 5 Commander Day Hyansik. For changing the flow of destiny, you are awarded 3 destiny energy. Congratulations to user for killing grade 5 Commander Day Insu. For changing the flow of destiny, you are awarded 1 destiny energy. Congratulations to user for killing grade 5 Commander Day Jianhuang. For changing the flow of destiny, you are awarded 1 destiny energy. As the trio fell, 3 independent notices sounded in Wang Chong's head. HM, Day Hyanseek, Day Insu, and Day Jianhuang. Wang Chong was surprised. In Goguryeo, commanders whose name were granted the title of Great possessed superior standing to their peers. Regardless of what their surname was before, upon reaching that rank, they would be addressed as Day, such as Day Hyanseek. This reflected their standing within Goguryeo. Day Hyanseek. This name sounds a little familiar. Frowning, Wang Chong fell into deep thought. Soon, he suddenly recalled something. Day Hyanseek. Wasn't that the Koguryo name of the Gogrian warrior Li Jihuan, who led a huge group of Gogrian warriors to raid the northeast of Great Tang, resulting in massive unease among the populace back then? In that period of chaos within the Central Plains, that person was the most hated Gogrian warrior amongst the populace living around the Eastern Protectorate Manor. Who knew that he would actually end up dying here? To think that he would be together with the King Sojurim from the very start. If not for this operation, he would have escaped back to Goguryeo together with King Sojurim after the assassinations and caused great harm on Great Tang's northeast border, Wang Chong thought. Considering how Day Hyanseek, or rather Li Jihuan, had been in Great Tang alongside King Sojurim for so long, it was no wonder why he would eventually lead an army back here and ravage the northeast border. Too bad he wouldn't be given the opportunity to do so in this life. But very quickly, Wang Chong's attention turned away from Day Hyanseek. Ha ha ha, to think that I would actually obtain 5 destiny energy. It sure is an unexpected gain. Wang Chong chuckled heartily within as he looked at the additional destiny energy he had earned. All he did was to lead a squad of cavalry and charge into the Goguryans' formation twice before instructing Luo Chong to shoot an arrow. And yet, he had already earned 5 destiny energy. He knew how hard it was to earn destiny energy, and so far this 5 destiny energy had been the easiest to earn. He had practically obtained them just by speaking a few words. Given Wang Chong's current strength, it would have been impossible for him to kill any of those 3 profound martial realm Gogrian commanders and obtain this destiny energy. If it were on any other occasion, he would surely flee as far as he could. This time, he had benefited from the efforts of the imperial army that the royal court dispatched, as well as his uncle Li Lin. It's a pity that this is a one-time only event. There won't be such opportunities in the future anymore. Wang Chong thought regretfully. Enemy commanders would never appear alone. By their sides were always huge armies of elites. Killing them was never, and would never be, an easy task. With this operation, the Goguryans had suffered a severe blow. They would be unable to conduct assassinations or the like within the capital for a short period of time. At the same time, the other nations, such as those from the western regions, would be deterred from plotting any schemes. In other words, such easy destiny energy would be the first and the last time for him. But at the very least, Wang Chong did learn a vital piece of news from this. So it seems that if I kill a commander of a hostile state and change destiny, I'll be able to obtain a bit of destiny energy, Wang Chong thought. In truth, he felt that this was his greatest gain from the operation. As the Stone of Destiny didn't mention such stuff, he had to uncover it himself. While he only earned a total of 5 points from this, it was cumulative. Stacking them up, they would surely form a sizable harvest.